Hello, everyone, and welcome to Easy English Talks podcast. We're doing something a little different today. We're going to try to learn how to learn English more effectively.
That sounds great.
Yeah, so we're diving deep into some seriously cool strategies, and hopefully we're going to come out the other side with some practical tips.
Sounds good to me.
Okay, great. So we're going to break down this pretty complex skill of learning a new language into smaller, easier to manage pieces. And get this.
Okay.
Our sources suggest that making mistakes can actually be a good thing when you're trying to learn something new.
That's interesting. What do you think about that?
Well, it makes sense to me. I mean, how else can you learn if you don't make mistakes?
And yeah, I think it's fascinating how we often tend to see mistakes as setbacks, when in reality they're incredibly valuable learning opportunities.
Yeah, I think you're right. Like there's signposts pointing you towards areas where you can improve.
Exactly.
So if we accept that mistakes are good, where do we even begin with this whole learning English effectively thing? Our sources seem to suggest that setting clear goals is a really important first step.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like if you're planning a trip,
Okay.
you wouldn't just start driving without knowing where you're going, right?
Right.
You need a destination in mind. The same principle applies to language learning. You need a clear roadmap to guide your efforts, and that's where SMART goals come in.
Okay, I've heard of SMART goals, but I'm not really sure how they work for language learning. Could you explain that a little?
Sure. So SMART goals are specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound.
Okay.
So instead of saying something general like, I want to be fluent in English,
Right.
which is a bit vague, you could set a more specific goal like, I want to be able to confidently order food in a restaurant in English within 2 months.
Oh, okay, I see.
That's specific and measurable. It's achievable, relevant to your needs, and it has a time frame attached to it.
That makes a lot more sense. So it's like setting smaller checkpoints on your journey to fluency.
Exactly.
Cool. So we've got our goals.
Well, that leads us nicely into the next step, which is breaking down the overall challenge into smaller, more manageable chunks.
Right, because learning English can sometimes feel like trying to climb a mountain. It can be pretty overwhelming if you look at it as one giant task.
I completely agree. It's a big challenge. Think of it this way. You wouldn't try to eat a whole pizza in one bite, would you?
No way.
You'd slice it up first. In the same way, you can break down English learning into key areas, like vocabulary, grammar, pronunciation, and conversational skills.
Oh, okay. And even within those areas, you could set even smaller goals.
Exactly.
Like instead of trying to memorize every word in the dictionary, you could focus on vocabulary for everyday conversations or words related to your hobbies.
Yeah, precisely. It's all about prioritizing and making it work for your situation.
Okay, so that brings us to the tools and resources.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's so much out there for English learners these days. It can almost feel like too much. What do you think are some of the best resources you've come across?
I think the most effective resources are the ones that match the individual's learning style and interests.
Right.
If you're a visual learner, for example, flashcards or language learning apps with pictures and things might be good. And if you're more of an auditory learner, you might enjoy podcasts or audiobooks. Even listening to music can be helpful.
It's like having a whole toolbox at your disposal, and you get to pick and choose the best tools for your needs.
Precisely. But remember, just having the tools isn't enough.
Oh, right.
You have to actually use them and use them consistently. Even if you can only dedicate 15 or 20 minutes each day, it can make a big difference over time.
I hear you on that. Consistency is key for any learning journey. I always compare it to building a muscle. You need to work out regularly to see any results.
That's a great analogy. Think of those small, consistent efforts as deposits into your language learning bank. They build up over time and eventually lead to some pretty impressive gains.
Okay, so we've set our goals, broken the big challenge down into smaller steps, found our tools, and we're being consistent. What's next?
Well, this is where it gets really interesting.
Ooh, okay. I'm intrigued.
This is where we embrace those inevitable mistakes. Many learners are afraid of making mistakes.
I can understand why. They can be embarrassing.
But they're absolutely crucial for growth.
Wait, are you saying that making mistakes is actually a good thing?
I am. They offer a chance to understand what went wrong and figure out how to do things better next time. It's like free feedback.
So it's less about trying to be perfect and more about learning and improving through those slip-ups.
Exactly. Mistakes are simply stepping stones on your path to fluency.
That actually reminds me of something funny that happened to me when I was trying to order coffee in France. Instead of saying un café au lait, I accidentally said un chat au lait, which means a cat and milk.
Oh, dear.
The barista looked at me like I had two heads. but I bet you I never forgot how to order coffee correctly after that.
You're absolutely right. Those embarrassing moments can sometimes be the best learning experiences.
It's true. So it seems like reframing our perception of mistakes is really important. We need to see them as powerful tools for learning.
Absolutely.
But I think we've only just scratched the surface of this topic.
I think you're right.
We'll have to dive deeper into this idea of turning blunders into building blocks for fluency in the next part of our deep dive.
Welcome back to Easy English Talks podcast. When we left off, we were talking about this idea of embracing mistakes. But how do we actually transform those blunders into stepping stones toward fluency?
That's a great question. It starts with changing how we think about mistakes. Instead of seeing them as failures, we need to view them as valuable feedback.
I totally agree. Each mistake is like a highlighter pen. It shows us an area where we can improve. Maybe it's a grammar rule that needs more practice or a pronunciation issue.
Yeah, it's like having a personal English coach who's always giving us pointers. But those pointers come in the form of those awkward silences or puzzled looks we get.
Exactly. And the key is to pay attention to that feedback. When you make a mistake, don't just brush it off. Take a moment to figure out what happened.
Oh, so it's like becoming a language detective.
Yeah.
We have to investigate those slip-ups and figure out the root cause. Did I mess up a vocabulary word? Did I use the wrong grammar? Was it my pronunciation?
Exactly. Once you know why you made the mistake, you can work on that specific area. Maybe you need to study some grammar rules, or practice your pronunciation, or learn some new words.
So we're turning those mistakes into chances to improve. And speaking of chances to improve, I think one of the best ways to get better at English is to actually use it in real-life situations.
Absolutely. Real-world practice is where it all comes together. It's where you take all the English you've been learning and use it.
It's like finally driving a car after months of driving lessons. It can be scary, but it's the best way to become a confident driver.
I like that analogy.
Or a confident English speaker. The more you use English in real life, the better you'll get at it.
For sure.
I'm sure some people listening are wondering how they can find opportunities to practice English in real life, especially if they don't live in an English-speaking country.
That's a good point, but there are actually lots of ways to practice English, even if you don't live in an English-speaking country. One good way is to connect with native English speakers online. There are websites and apps that can help you find someone to chat with.
Oh, that's cool. And even if you can't find someone to talk to, you can still do things at home to practice.
Definitely. You can surround yourself with English, watch movies and TV shows in English, listen to English music and podcasts, read English books and articles, make English a part of your daily life.
I think that's a really important takeaway from all of this. There's no magic trick to learning English. It's about putting in the work and finding ways to use English every day.
I agree with that. It's about consistent effort and turning those mistakes into chances to learn, and it's about finding ways to make English part of your life.
So we've talked about setting goals, breaking things down, finding tools, being consistent, and we've talked about using our mistakes to help us learn. We've also talked about practicing in real-life situations. Anything else?
Well, we need to talk about how to make sure we're actually improving and going in the right direction.
Oh, yeah. How do we do that?
We need to track our progress. It's like having a map and compass for our English learning journey.
What do you mean?
We need a way to see how much we've improved and see what areas we need to work on.
I like that idea. It's like keeping a language learning journal where we can write about our successes, our challenges, and our thoughts along the way.
Exactly. You can also use apps that have features that track your progress. Or you can just set some goals for yourself and celebrate when you reach them. The important thing is to find something that works for you and keeps you going.
That brings up another important point. Staying motivated. Learning a new language can be tough, and there will be times when you feel stuck.
Definitely. Do you have any advice on how to stay motivated?
Well, I think it helps to remember why you started learning English in the first place. What do you want to be able to do with your English skills?
Do you want to travel the world? Do you want to meet people from different cultures? Do you want to get a better job? Or do you just want to learn something new?
Thinking about your goals can help you stay motivated when it gets tough.
It's like having a North Star that helps you navigate through those difficult moments.
And don't forget to celebrate your successes.
That's right. Every new word you learn, every conversation you have, every goal you reach is a reason to celebrate.
Give yourself a pat on the back. Those small wins can really help keep you going.
They do. Remember, learning a language is like running a marathon. It's not a sprint. It takes time and effort.
You'll have good days and bad days, but if you keep moving forward, you'll get there.
Exactly.
So we've talked about a lot of different things today, from setting goals and breaking things down to embracing mistakes and finding ways to practice English in real life.
It's been a great conversation.
It has. But before we finish this part of our deep dive, I'd love to hear your thoughts on something that I think a lot of English learners struggle with: the fear of making mistakes.
I think that's one of the biggest things that holds people back from learning English.
It stops them from speaking up, trying new things, and improving.
Exactly. So how do we help people overcome that fear?
Well, I think it starts with realizing that making mistakes is a normal part of learning any language. We need to see mistakes as opportunities to learn and grow.
I agree. It's not about being perfect. It's about being willing to try to make mistakes and to learn from them.
I think it's important to remember that everyone makes mistakes, even native English speakers. Mistakes are just part of using a language.
Absolutely. In fact, some of the best English speakers I know are people who used to make a lot of mistakes.
They learn from their mistakes and use them to get better.
That's right.
So to all our listeners out there, don't be afraid to make mistakes.
Right.
Don't be afraid to try new things, and don't be afraid to mess up. It's all part of the process.
That's great advice. Embrace those mistakes, learn from them, and keep practicing. The goal isn't to be perfect. It's to be able to communicate and connect with others and experience the world through English.
Well said. We've covered a lot of ground today, from setting smart goals and breaking down challenges to embracing mistakes and finding ways to use English in the real world. But we're not finished yet.
There's still more to talk about. In the last part of our deep dive, we'll look at the mental side of language learning. We'll talk about mindset, motivation, and how to keep going when it gets tough.
We'll be back in a few minutes, so stay tuned. Welcome back to Easy English Talks podcast. We're on the final part of our deep dive into how to learn English effectively. And we're getting into some really interesting stuff. Our sources talk about the psychological side of language learning, like your mindset and how that can impact your progress.
Absolutely. Your mindset, your beliefs about learning, all of that can make a huge difference. If you start out thinking that you're bad at languages or that learning English is going to be a nightmare, well, you're probably right.
It's like you've already given up before you even start.
Yeah, but the good news is that you can actually change your mindset. It's about developing a growth mindset. That's the belief that you can get better at things if you put in the effort.
Okay, so instead of saying, I'm terrible at grammar, I could say, grammar is tough, but I'm going to keep working on it.
Exactly. It's about focusing on learning and celebrating the little wins along the way.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And it also ties in with something we've talked about before, staying motivated. It's easy to be excited at the beginning,
Yeah.
but how do you keep that motivation going?
Yeah.
Especially when things get difficult.
I think it really helps to remember why you're learning English. What are you hoping to achieve?
Like, do you want to travel the world?
Yeah.
Do you want to connect with people from other cultures?
Right.
Do you want to improve your career options? Or maybe you just want to challenge yourself and learn something new.
Exactly. Having a clear reason for why you're doing something can really help you stay motivated, especially when it gets tough.
It's like having a goal in mind, a picture of what you're working towards. It can give you that extra push when you need it.
Definitely. And remember, motivation isn't always about feeling super excited. Sometimes it's just about showing up and doing the work even when you don't really feel like it.
So making English a part of your daily routine, even if it's just for a few minutes each day.
Yeah, exactly. And you know what? Sometimes just starting is enough to get you motivated.
What do you mean?
Well, sometimes you just have to open that language app or pick up that English book or start listening to that podcast. And then once you're doing it, you might find that you actually start enjoying it.
Like that saying, appetite comes with eating.
That's a good one.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive, from setting goals and breaking things down to embracing mistakes and finding ways to practice English in real life. And we've talked about the importance of mindset and motivation. What else is there?
I think it's important to remember that learning a language takes time and effort. There's no quick fix.
Yeah.
Be patient with yourself. Don't get
Mhm.
discouraged if you don't see results immediately. Just keep practicing, keep learning, and remember why you started.
That's such great advice. It's a marathon, not a sprint. So to wrap up, I just want to say that learning English can be an amazing journey. It can open up so many doors and connect you with people from all over the world. So if you're listening and you're learning English, keep going. You're doing great. And don't forget to enjoy the process.
Well said. And remember, we're here to help. So keep listening to Easy English Talks podcast for more tips and strategies. And don't be afraid to reach out if you have any questions.
Thank you so much for joining us. We hope you found this deep dive helpful and inspiring. Remember, even small steps can lead to big results if you're consistent. So keep practicing, keep learning, and we'll see you in the next episode. Don't forget to follow for more.